Hello. So we're moving into the Scorpio full moon in the second decan, and I feel like the burning question of this full moon is, what is being refined in a close connection for you? Can you trust what is remaining if something's being exfoliated off? This is a full moon that's plunging us into deep, dark and still waters. It's shining a reflective light on the secrets that are held within. The moon is in its full here, a place of emotional intensity, secrecy, and desires in the fixed yin or feminine water sign of Scorpio. The moon navigates through this shadowy terrain where feelings run deep and transformation arrives through symbolic cycles of death and rebirth. This full moon feels quiet and yet significant as you're asked to face these secrets of your psyche. Feel into what is being shown to you and turn it over. Feel where it lands in your body. Scorpios don't rush to conclusions. It's asking you to remain present with what is uncomfortable, meaningful, or unresolved, unseen, and allow it to gently float to the surface of your awareness. I'm Sonia from Celestial Astrology, and thank you for joining me as we look deeper into this Scorpio full moon. In this video, I'll first cover how I can help you, but also let's look at journal prompts and a simple water ritual that you might want to do at this full moon. I'll look at the nature of Scorpio and its yin and fixed nature. We'll look at the nature of a full moon as well, and in particular this Scorpio moon and moon cycles and this Scorpio moon family. The decan of Scorpio 2, where this full moon is falling, and the tarot correspondence, and also a verse by T. Susan Chang. Always, we'll look at the astrological conversation, where the planets are in the sky, and what does that tell us? And then finally, I'll draw it all together and come back to the burning question that I just asked you about what's being refined for you right now in your close connections. So if you journal, here are some prompts that you might want to consider at this time. What feels significant right now? Maybe it's only arising on the edge of your subconscious, where have you already become involved in something, whether you perhaps intended to or not? What are you afraid might happen if you stay present with something that's arising for you? Where are you being asked to hold something with more care? And what feels worth honouring, and what weight does it carry for you? And what perhaps was hidden and is now just coming to light, even if it's maybe only in your own mind? And here's a simple ritual about the meeting of waters. And for this one, you just need 2 glasses of water. Don't fill them. You only need them about a third full, and a quiet space, a little bit of time to yourself. So sit with both glasses in front of you and maybe decide which one represents you, where you are now, and allow the other to represent a person, a situation, or a bond that feels significant right now, that's coming up for your attention, and that you're feeling called to explore at this time of the full moon. And then just relax. There's nothing more to do. Just soften your gaze, relax, and explore the water of both glasses. Notice and explore whatever arises in your mind, what thoughts are passing through as you consider the separateness of this situation or topic that you've chosen or person, and you in your separate states. And when you feel that you've done that and your mind's beginning to wander too much to other topics and you're finding it hard to keep bringing it back and you feel like the time's up naturally, choose one glass. It doesn't matter which, but it may be significant to you which you choose. And slowly, very slowly, pour that water into the other glass and just observe what happens as the water that's poured meets the water that's still in the receiving glass. How do they merge? There's no separation any longer. They're not in their separate containers. Everything becomes shared. And it's hard to see what was once one water and what was once the other. That division has disappeared. And if you want to carry on further and it feels natural for you, allow your gaze to soften once more and your breathing to slow. And again, look into that water, that new water that's been merged. Allow the room around you to fade and measure awareness with the water. You might like then to ask some questions quietly, and they might be your own questions. So feel free to improvise however you feel called to. But here are some suggestions. What has already been shared here? What is mine to honour within this? What is still feeling raw beneath the surface? Or any other question that's calling you. And just see what arises for you. What do you see within that merged water? How do your thoughts change now that that water has been merged? Just see what comes up and then journal and notice those responses. And I hope that gives you new insight to the situation, the person, the bond that you brought to the ritual. When you're ready, choose your closing words with gratitude. Thank the water, thank the situation or the person for the insight, thank your guides if you've invited them in. And you may choose to drink the water, merging it into your body. And then, as you do, accept and integrate what has been shared and the lessons and what you've experienced, the insights that it's brought you. Or otherwise, you might prefer to pour it away. And if you do so, do this with intention, preferably into a larger body of water in nature that's flowing or onto the earth. And as you do, acknowledge and release what is no longer yours to hold. And again, give thanks to anyone that you called in to help you with this and to the situation and for the insights that you've been given. So I hope you found that helpful. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Scorpio gives me the deepest, longest ritual so far. The others have been very simple and short. So let's look at Scorpio fixed yin water. Scorpio is a fixed water sign. It's deeply yin or otherwise feminine and still and subterranean. This is water that doesn't seem to move very quickly on the surface. It stews, it seeps, it remembers. And this fixed modality gives it an endurance and a resilience, while the feminine quality is giving it receptivity and this inward looking nature. You might picture dark caves, or if you prefer, hot springs, those secrets held within murky swamp water or the soggy ashes after a fire. This is the spirit realm of the serpent, the compost heap, the scorpion, and the phoenix. Mars rules Scorpio, but here we are offered a battle-weary side of the dusty warrior planet. Mars is exploring the unfamiliar emotions of why he enters conflict. To defend and protect, maybe, but perhaps he's asking himself, what is he protecting? And why does he defend? This is the watery moat trench or the hot bath that eases our aching muscles, where reflection allows old identities to dissolve and obsessions to rot into the fertile soil to alchemize before rebirth. The Mars rulership gives it resolve and the ability to transform. These waters do not flow around obstacles, they're more likely to dissolve them. They hold that grief and that passion, memory and metamorphosis. Scorpio acts with intention. It chooses where to place its energy, and once it does, it doesn't easily let go. Scorpio is known for its intensity. It commits and it invests, binds itself to what matters and what feels important, and then works through what that brings. It wants to stay with something long enough to understand it from the inside. A full moon here can often bring emotional clarity, but this may not be experienced in a clean or comfortable, simple, surface kind of way. It asks you to really feel into what is real, and often that can be raw and tender for us. You may find that emotions can reach a peak of intensity, which they often do at times of full moons, but especially for a Scorpio moon. The past can rise unbidden, and anything that's been swept under the rug before now can re-emerge. Scorpio teaches us how to contain power, how to hold pain with dignity, but also how to alchemize endings into new thresholds. The moon is in her fall here, depressed, discomforted, vulnerable, far from her exaltation, where the sun is shining in Taurus. This lunar placement is often emotionally raw, and this is how we get a lot of the delineations from, exposing buried patterns and the desire to cling to these memories and emotions. Yet it is from this depth of emotion that a new power can arise, because the only path for the moon now is to rise up, but how we should choose to do it. Mars, ruler of Scorpio, gives us some information about that. Mars does not have a traditional aspect of sight to offer support from Aries, so it is preoccupied and busy in its home sign because it's got this stellium of other planets that it needs to manage. It's got Saturn, Neptune, and Mercury all still there. Chiron's there too. And of course, Mars itself is at home there with the upkeep to maintain, having been away from home for 2 years. There's work to be done. But Mars does have the quality of liking girding, which brings an alternative, more subtle form of support through shared rulership of Aries and Scorpio by Mars. The full moon is a moment of illumination and culmination. The sun and moon are opposite each other in the sky, and something that has been building since the new moon comes into view. This is a peak moment in the cycle. There are no shadows. The sun in Taurus allows us to see the full beauty of the moon in the sky. Sometimes this doesn't bring the closure that we might be needing. More often it's a recognition of what is needed as the next step. And it is the closing quarter or the balsamic moon which brings that closure and that release. For now, you see what has been grown. You might feel into what has taken shape through your emotions, your memories, your intuition, perhaps your dreams, before you reflect and are asked to respond. Maybe that response will arrive as integration, action, release, or commitment. It'll be different for each of us, depending on where our Aries and Scorpio houses fall. In Scorpio, you may find yourself moving through different stages of response. So if we look at the cycles of the moon and the moon family, we know that astrologically, we may have multiple lunar cycles occurring simultaneously. The moon cycles can be tracked in several different ways, depending on what you're seeking. The most immediate and fast is the monthly lunar cycle, which spans approximately 28 days from the new moon until the next new moon. There is also a 6-month cycle between a new moon and the subsequent full moon in the same cycle. So this full moon in Scorpio had a new moon 6 months ago. So the seeds planted during that moon come to a fuller fruition now. But that new moon may not have been in the same place. It might not have been in the same decan or around the same degree range. So this is why I also use moon families, because they return to the same area within the same couple of degree range. So if you're looking for a 6-monthly cycle, you can look back at your story over the last 6 months and see what has been growing for you at this time. And then you can see it fade or change and release over the next 6 months as you prepare for the next new moon in Scorpio. But this full moon is part of a lunar gestational cycle or a moon family. This is a pattern that unfolds over 27 months, just over 2 years, marked by key lunation phases as the moon returns to that same degree range of the zodiac, a small range of degrees, approximately 7 degrees I've found, 5 degrees applying and 2 degrees separating, in a progressing relationship with the sun. Moon families mark developmental arcs, longer stories that build time. They begin with a seed of intention or insight at the new moon. They find their first visibility 9 months later, so they just grow slowly over that 9 months. And then 9 months later, things are visible, but they reach this crossroads, this crisis point, a tension, asking for some adjustment, a decision, or changes. And then they reach full clarity and culmination after 18 months, where they reach the full moon point, where there's a result, there's this peak or culmination. And then there's a resolution or an integration after 27 months, when we then move into this time of release, reflection, and preparation for the next cycle. Moon families were introduced by astrologer Dietrich Pessin in Lunar Shadows 3. This creates a hidden thread of a lunar gestation for those of us whose natal chart placements are activated by each moon family degree range and by the ruler. For this moon family in Scorpio, the moon family is illuminating a story that began in November 2024 with the moon family in the first decan, which is known as hunger and intensity. And I'm just going to share my screen and bring up the key dates for this cycle. So here we have the Scorpio full moon for the 1st of May. And I've given an illustration of how the moons look from the dark moon. We go round to the left to the first quarter. And then I've got a little finger pointing there to the full moon. And that's where we are in this lunar gestation cycle after 18 months. So you can see the dates. We've got the new moon was on the 1st of November at 9 degrees of Scorpio. So that would have fell in the first decan. And then the first quarter was on the 1st of August 2025, and that also fell in the first decan at 9 degrees of Scorpio. This full moon on the 1st of May is falling in the second decan at 11 degrees of Scorpio. And the last quarter on the 29th of January 2027 will fall again in the first decan. So this moon family will most affect those with placements or angles between 4 to 13 degrees of the fixed signs, which is Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo. And also those with placements within 4 to 13 degrees of water signs, Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer. Those with Mars as their perfected Lord of the Year or their solar return chart ruler. If you're not sure An astrologer or astro coach can help you identify if your placements are affected. We do this work in Celestia Circle as well, and we identify what the moon families mean for participants by looking more deeply into them. You can also comment moon family, and I will help you. If your chart is activated, so if you've got a placement within those ranges, so say your ascendant, your MC, sun, moon, rising, or any of your other traditional planets, you might want to think back to November 2024 and to what might have begun then, even though it might have been quiet or subtle, and what was growing between November and August 2025. And you may find that the thread required action around August 2025. So it might be easier to start with what did you change in August 2025 that was linked to November, that when you look back from August, you can see that it started in November. Sometimes the start can be hard to put your finger on, but with hindsight, it's easier to see. You realize that it's connected to this moment now, and then it's easier to notice what's coming up now around you and see it as part of this 3-point now story. But also it means that you'll know at the end of January 2027 that you're in that release and integrating phase. So if things are coming up for you, you know exactly how to deal with them. It gives you this insight into what's happening. You're not trying to build and create around them because you know that you're in that release, integration, and preparing for a new cycle phase then. So under this full moon, you can see what has been forming as it's culminating, as it's being illuminated. This cycle is speaking to this trust, these shared experiences, to emotional bonds, and the deeper layers of commitment, but also to that hunger and intensity of the first decan. Please do share if this cycle is calling to you and activating your chart. I love to hear your stories. So now we move on to looking at the decan of Scorpio 2, Sacred Trust. And what I've shared here is the Wild Way card for this decan, Dive Deep. And we'll come to an explanation of that in a moment. Scorpio is known as a sign that thrives on deep intimacy, and we especially witness this in Scorpio 2. Austin Coppock has named this decan dual distillation. Again, think of those two glasses of water merging. In 36 Phases, he talks about how it requires a willingness to merge. When you merge at this deep, vulnerable level, potentially in a physical sharing of body fluids, in the alchemy, or the melting of ideas and minds, there is a vulnerability and a trust in the other. This relies on a willingness of both parties to engage in an intimate emotional exchange. Austin Coppock writes of oaths, allegiances, and binding agreements. However, these are not always formal or acknowledged. Sometimes they happen quietly. It is as if something has been poured from one vessel into another. It cannot be separated and be quite the same again. We can get 2 glasses of water again, but they'll never be the same 2 glasses of water. Here we see how the dual distillation of fluids in a fixed water elemental sign can offer emerging, but also demand purity of souls to enter into a partnership. Memories become linked, intuition heightens, and imagination soars. The partnership becomes greater than the sum of its parts. With its own internal combustion and fixed lasting power, there is great potential for relationships, whether romantic, business, friendship, or otherwise, formed with the blessing of this decan. However, there is also a raw vulnerability, as you will be permanently changed, whatever the outcome. I wrote about this in depth for the Astrologers Co-op, and if you want a deeper reflection on the nature of fixed yin water for this decan and some insight into my own placements in this decan, you can find it in the Astrologers Co-op Substack, and I've put a link in the show notes. With 2 life-giving planets ruling this decan, the Sun and Jupiter, the boost that the moon needs to regenerate is provided. The Sun will help illuminate and warm, allowing something to become clear. Jupiter adds faith and meaning. You begin to understand why this matters, why this connection holds weight, and to believe in it or not. This is where intensity can shift to become devotion. Kira Ryberg calls this decan symbiosis. This again invokes the theme of this irreversible merging process, which is usually, but not always, beneficial to both parties. Just like the ritual water, once merged, it can never be returned to the original form. It is forever altered. So now we get to this Wild Way card, and it's called Dive Deep. We're given this image of the 2 puffins diving together into deep waters. They're twisting and turning and just enjoying the fun of swimming together in harmony and reflecting each other's twists and turns. The card offers keywords to help and guide us at this time: alchemical collaboration, intimate exchange, and nostalgia. I have an excerpt from the World Way Oracle Guidebook by Nicola Allen, which explains some of the puffin's story. As the Scorpio 2 puffins fly through the depths of the ocean together, they intimately twist and turn through the water, creating a beautiful partnership full of mutual exchange and pleasure. They remind us that to realize such ideal connections, vulnerability and intimacy must be present, and over time, a deep sense of trust must be carefully built. When heavy seas bring choppier waters to your relationship, this is what may be relied upon to help you both navigate safely back to shore. They remind us that when we become vulnerable with one another, we are building a real connection. We may enjoy the fun and laughter, but the foundation of trust will be there to support us through darker times. And now we come to the tarot correspondence, the Six of Cups. In the card, we're shown two childlike figures. There are 6 cups, and they all contain flowers. Maybe they're growing in the cups, or maybe the cups are a temporary container, as you might see in a florist. 4 of the cups are in the foreground. One stands on a short pillar behind the taller child, and the last is in his hands, as he appears to be handing it or gifting it to the other. In the background, after the burst of colour of the foreground, there is a greyed out path to the left, with an adult figure walking away towards buildings in colour. At first glance, it looks like a simple scene. When you look closer, you may feel why this card is known as nostalgia. The way the light changes, maybe with our attention and memories. With the cup passing from hands to hands, we might see this as symbolic of the present transforming into the past. How do we hold remembrance? And what memories do we colour with sweetness and nostalgia? This verse, I like to call Timeless Key, from T. Susan Chang's Dreaming the Decans, beautifully evokes the nostalgic, hazy depths of this decan and reminds us that we can access it through love. Timeless key to long-lost treasure. In daylight, for one day we live. That which I love I dare to give, for gifts can never have a price. Find meaning in the sacrifice. In the twilight haze I see ghosts of blessed memory. The present slips into the past. Love alone is sure to last. Now we come to the astrological conversation, as always. This full moon is complex, as you've seen. It's emotionally intense, as we might expect when the moon is in her full in Scorpio. The moon here must work hard to rise up again from this place of her greatest challenge. Her usual nurturing light that we come to rely on and expect becomes filtered through these underground chthonic waters. It's slow, it's fixed, it's hidden, it's pressurized. The moon herself is uncomfortable, but she's facing her truths and allowing that discomfort to inform her journey through these 3 decans of Scorpio. I like to think that the moon reaches her turning point here in the 2nd decan, where she gathers those memories of the past and remembers her purpose before she becomes re-empowered in the 3rd decan to continue on her journey, where she nurtures and cares for us all, connecting with all the planets on her monthly trip around the zodiac. Temporarily, she is less able to attend to our needs, as she first must attend to her own, as all mothers must at times. Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, is in Aries, in a place of heat and youthful intensity. Ruler Mars has no traditional line of sight to the moon. However, there is this more subtle support mentioned earlier, called liking girding, as both planets, the moon and Mars, are in signs ruled by Mars, and they're operating in Mars's environments. So there is that element of sympathy and support. Mars in Aries, it's asking that we act now, raising the pace and the temperature. But the moon in Scorpio is reflective, looking at connections and past nostalgia. So staying mindful of conflict that might be born of unresolved emotional baggage or expectations. And as always, even if you're not feeling this tension, be aware that others around you may be. The moon in Scorpio is shining opposite the sun in Taurus. Taurus is steady and stabilizing, while Scorpio alchemizes and transforms. And oppositions are of the nature of Saturn. So there is already this tension between these opposites. Something may have to be released, or you may feel pulled between holding on perhaps to the past or letting go in order to move forward. Maybe between preserving something or seeing it more truthfully. You might feel this as a quiet tension in a sensitive part of your body. Part of you could want to hold on to what feels familiar and reliable, while another part of you knows that there is more beneath the surface and craves that honesty. Remembering the nodes, a pattern is unveiling here. The moon has just moved away from a trine and sextile connection with the north and south nodes in Pisces and Virgo. An old pattern may have recently played out or been loosened, perhaps reminding you of events put in motion by previous eclipses. Maybe it is helping to allow you the space to see it clearly now, to separate past from future, nostalgia from dreams. You may even experience deja vu, but now you have awareness. You can see the shape of it. You're cognizant of the astrological context which frames it, and that brings you choices and agency. After Aquarius Pluto, a new truth has surfaced. The moon is separating from a recent square connection with Pluto. You've already met this pressure or intensity. The sun also met Pluto on the 25th of April and illuminated the deepest truths. Maybe something was revealed or something shifted, and now you're being asked to integrate this knowledge. So maybe a shift in how you see someone, or a realization that you can't ignore any longer. This might be a time when something becomes undeniable, or you might have a sense of quiet after purging, releasing something that's quite intense. Jupiter in Cancer connects with Scorpio moon to offer gentle support. There's an applying trine from the moon to exalted Jupiter in Cancer, and that's offering you quiet reassurance, optimism, wisdom, and perhaps support from family with those tender memories being brought up again. It reinforces that you have the quiet strength for this process as it is forming. And elsewhere in the sky, Mars in Aries is also squaring that Jupiter in Cancer, asking, will you act or are you waiting? The moon's ruler Mars reaches a crossroads, a tension that asks for action as Jupiter is asking for considered care. You might feel a sudden urge to do something. You might feel pulled to make a decision, to speak, or a need to move things forward. And Jupiter in Cancer offers you optimism and a belief that things will work out, which could be exaggerated. So take care with that. You'll need to consider the emotional reality of the situation as well. As Mercury is applying to connect with Chiron at 27 degrees of Aries, we find that words matter. Conversations may feel particularly sensitive around this time. You may hear difficult truths that reach into your core wound, a tender spot that the speaker may be unaware of, whether you are the speaker or if you hear these difficult words. Be aware of the potential for healing that comes when this conjunction arrives with the moon. Chiron in Aries with Mercury may trigger wounds around speaking your truth, being allowed to speak for yourself, or being heard when you do. Try and be a mindful speaker and listener in your interactions. Venus in Gemini is sextiling Saturn in Aries. Something is holding. There may be opportunities to build social connections or to renew old acquaintances. This could bring a sense that something is worth the effort that it's requiring. You may renew some steady or mature relationships, or a connection quietly proves its worth. These relationships forged in the raw truth of Scorpio too have the potential to endure. And finally, we return to the burning question of this lunation. What is being refined in a close connection now? Can you trust what remains? Can you identify what has already been under pressure? Where is there a shift, a realization, or a moment that has clarified more than you expected? Perhaps it began with Aries heat. Now things quieten with the softness of a Scorpio moon, allowing you to reflect and turn inwards, offering you the space to notice what is settling and what is falling away. Not everything is meant to stay. Some expectations may dissolve, but take notice of what remains, in whatever form, perhaps a feeling, a truth, a connection with depth and substance. It could be something that you sense, still emerging from the depths of the scorpionic waters. You may already know where something has been changing, where the pressure point has been, and now consider whether you trust what's still there. Once everything has moved, what is now separate, what has merged, and what will never be the same again? As you reweave these threads of your story, are you ready to dive deep, just like those sweet puffins? I hope this full moon goes well for you. Travel well, friends.